Own the Road with Kelli and Bob, the USA250 Tour, brought to you by Mueller.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for On the Road with Kelli and Bob. I'm Bob Phillips.
And I'm Kelli Phillips. This is the beginning of a special year-long series that we'll be doing throughout 2026. It's called the USA250 Tour.
Yep, and it is in celebration, of course, of the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. So during the next 12 months, we will be bringing you one story from each of the 50 states.
Now, in keeping with our tradition of not always telling you stories you would expect, of finding those little, almost hidden gems that may surprise you, we will be bringing you some stories that at first glance will have you wondering, what's this all about?
Yeah, but first, we think it's a good idea to set the stage for what would eventually come to be known as the United States of America. How and why did all of that happen? How accurate are the history books? What's been left out of the stories we've been told for most of our lives?
Right now, we want to welcome David Wood, the curator of the Concord Museum in Concord, Massachusetts, and someone who can talk to us about how all of this happened, what made the former British colonist revolt, and when did that actually begin? Was it not until the mid-1770s or much earlier?
It's like Shakespeare said, if not now, when? The readiness is all. And they were ready. It was just going to happen. And really the question is, you start, well, when was it inevitable? April 18th? Yeah, certainly. March? Well, probably. October? Yeah, I think so. 1770? Yeah. 1768, 65, 63, 61. You just keep going back.
It was going to happen.
Yeah.
When did people start becoming disgruntled? Was it with the new king? Was it with the tax situation? What?
It was in 1610.
That far back?
It depends on how you start the story. In fact, I was just reading the address of the American consul in China in 1875, and he gave an acknowledgement on July 4th, and that's where he started the story, 1610. And you can do it. What happened was, or what the revolution was the transition from a monarchy to a republic. And so that's then becomes the exercises. When did that happen? So Gideon Nye, he said, it's 1610. and you can make that argument. He did, or what you will. But certainly by April 19th, that transition had already happened. I like to say the revolution was already over on April 19th. It was the Revolutionary War that began on April 19th. And in that sense of transition from monarchy to republic, it was over. When the Provincial Congress formed itself out of the Massachusetts Assembly in 1774, they were behaving as a republic, where it's all elected officials and they're on committees. And that's how business is being transacted. There was no governor. At that point, they were paying no attention to the king. They were still saying, oh yes, we're loyal to the king. They didn't mean it. So, it's just a matter of where you want to start your argument. Why were they so committed to this? Because, in a sense, it's not the kind of revolution where you have a really downtrodden group and they finally throw off their shackles and rise up. things were pretty good in America at that time, better than they had ever been. But what they saw coming was that this story could change. The reason you start this story in 1620 or what you will is that there's something that happens. You're 3,000 miles away from the center of government, and there's a lot of independence from the very beginning. If you read the Mayflower Compact, it sounds astonishingly like the charters that are coming out in 1776. They're already there, and they've gotten used to it. I think justifiably recognized as holding the torch for this kind of liberty. And it is liberty. Liberty is the right to do everything that the laws permit. And that's what they were fighting for. The things that Parliament is doing, which is, those are all the headline things. Oh, they passed this law and that bill and this bill. Those are all thin edge of the wedge. And what they knew was that if you keep going in that way, all your liberties are gone. And that's what they were opposing. They could see that coming.
Did mankind even have a sense of what liberty and freedom meant prior to the Magna Carta?
Well, before Magna Carta?
Yeah.
That would be a different debate. But this matter of defining the relationship between government and liberty, an exercise in the 17th century. That's what John Locke is writing about. That's what David Hume is writing about. They're intellectualizing processes that were already in place and already going. Really, when you start looking at something like Parliament and its relationship to a monarch, and try to define it mathematically, which is actually what they were trying to do, then you get this different understanding of it. That can carry on all by itself and still not have too much to do with the day-to-day conduct of life. But I guess on April 19th, they're coming together.
Let me take you out of Massachusetts for a minute.
Okay.
Where did Thomas Jefferson and the others even come up with the words for that incredible document called the Declaration of Independence?
In a way, that's articulating what's already there. In other words, they're not making those words up and saying, here's the way we're going to go. This is what they knew. They're writing down what they knew. You have the right to dissolve government if it's not working for you, and all people are created equal. So that's the first two paragraphs. There it is. Then the rest of it is the complaints they have for this instance. They just say, it's only polite to tell the rest of the world why we're doing this. But first and foremost, we have the right to dissolve the government if it doesn't work for us, and we're all equal. Then the rest follows. One way to look at it is they're expressing the common sense that they live with. You can trace back even single words in that. It's right there in the Constitution of Massachusetts. Oh, it's reflected in the Constitution of the United States. Well, that's not a coincidence. And it's not that they're plagiarizing the one to make the other. It's like this is the common understanding. It's like this is how it works.
What do you want people that come to this museum, what do you want them to take home with them?
Really the immediacy of the fact of these events. Be convinced that these things happened, and happened at a human level, absolutely at a human level. It's so easy to make these characters, Paul Revere or whoever, make them bigger than life. I wouldn't say they're bigger in life, they're just a reminder of how big life can be. They're wonderful examples for the way they conduct their own lives.
And what a great way to start this USA250 tour that we're going to be doing all year. David Wood really knows his stuff, and he spent a lot of time explaining something that we all heard when we were growing up about that famous shot heard round the world. He says it's not as simple as it's made to sound in those history books.
They were supplies for an army of 15,000 in Concord, and they knew it, and April 16th, Gage finally got the orders from England, do it now. He didn't want to. He knew he was outnumbered, but he sent out the expedition. And that map, and that last one, that web of blue lines from all those communities, that's the point. It wasn't just Lexington and Concord. There were 23 communities that sent their militia soldiers out to engage the line, and they did.
I think that if you don't know the story, you hear about the shot heard around the world, and you picture this as being a skirmish that was over in minutes. But according to this timeline,
Took all day.
this took all day long, all night, and then all day.
A long day.
Like 19 and a half hours before the siege of Boston began.
Right. And the received notion is sort of, nobody would have known anything was going on if Paul Revere hadn't ridden out. But that's not quite the case. Give Revere his due, and that is the lantern. That's one of the two lanterns that was used as a signal from North Church. It shone from the belfry of North Church.
The church.
This is one of the treads from the belfry, so whoever carried the lanterns up there stepped on that.
Oh my gosh.
And the signal wasn't to Revere, it was to the militia in Charlestown saying, because Revere had to go across the Charles River. He had to go under the guns of the HMS Somerset in the almost full moon. And he thought, I'm probably not going to make it. This was a backup. And he said, if there's two lanterns, they're going to come across the water. If there's one lantern, they'll go out Roxbury Neck, that skinny little Roxbury Neck there, which is defended by a fortress, so not easy. The alarm spread at about 7 miles an hour. The soldiers came in at about 3 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour for one of the northern communities. That's a pretty quick march. And they hit the column exactly where it was every time, because there were riders all over the place spreading the information about where they were.
And there were other riders alerting people other than Paul Revere. He just had the best marketing.
You got it, yeah.
By way of a poem.
Yeah, exactly. But again, Revere also, he got captured, he got released. A sensible person might go home. No, he went right back to Buckman Tavern, picked up a trunk of the most treasonous papers it would be possible to, and when the firing broke out on Lexington Common, Revere was there. He had just gone through the militia with this trunk of hangable stuff, and then the firing broke out. He heard what he thought was a pistol shot. So he was right there. He was half a pistol shot away, he said, when the firing broke out.
This guy had some nerve.
Yes. That's what he did. So it was Revere who carried the Suffolk Resolves to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. So that's in 1774, fall of 1774. Revere was that rider. The news of the destruction of the tea in Boston Harbor, Revere carried that news to Philadelphia. That's what he did. That was his job for the province, and he was happy to do it.
For you, a person who is well versed in what happened and what we know happened, are you amazed or not surprised at all that we've made it to 250 years of our country?
Yeah, the stability of these political structures are not given. It's as well probably to think of political structures as something like weather.
Some people would say, you're asking, why here? Some people might say, it's you Massachusetts people. You throw tea into the harbor, you start things up, and you start firing on the world's largest army.
No, that's fair. That's actually fair.
That's fair.
Because the Continental Congress did not approve this action before it happened. They said always act on the defensive. There was communication, and again, here's Revere. He's carrying the word back and forth. They say, always be on the defensive. But they didn't actually say, shoot on that day.
Do that. Yeah.
Or if they did, it's not recorded. But also the Continental Congress did not know about Bunker Hill, didn't say do that. They did not know about seizing Fort Ticonderoga. That's Massachusetts again. And, Connecticut, Vermont, Massachusetts.
What does it do for you when you see someone leave this museum
and they get it finally.
Oh, yeah,
Right through 'em.
it's the best thing. Yeah, it's the best. You know, it's like on that map that we were looking at, and when the blue bar gets longer than the red bar, and the 10-year-olds go, "Yay!" It's like, yeah, that's
That's a moment.
it's rewarding. Yeah, it's great.
Now, the next story in this series is probably something you are not expecting.
It's about a place in eastern Louisiana, a place that wasn't even a part of the United States until the Jefferson presidency and the Louisiana Purchase. But during the time we're talking about, well, it wasn't part of any country at all, at least not one we know about.
So why do we start our celebration of America's birthday here? Well, because it's the oldest known settlement where people who are indigenous to what would become the USA lived. It's called Poverty Point.
I grew up starting early on in New Orleans, uptown, and then my parents moved to Slidell, north of the lake. That's where I did most of my growing up. I like school. I like learning about history and prehistory and science. I did my degrees first, undergraduate in history at Springhill College, and then did my grad work at Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland. But when I moved back home, I started looking for stuff I could do and stuff that I cared about, and ended up at Poverty Point.
Mark Brink Jr. always knew his life would revolve around our history. He just didn't know early on how far back that history would go.
As it turns out, Mark is the manager at a place called Poverty Point, a Louisiana state park and a World Heritage Site. And what does that mean? Well, simply put, it means this place is very important, even though our knowledge of what went on here barely scratches the surface.
What do you know about Poverty Point?
Not a lot.
I don't know that a lot of people know about Poverty Point
Okay.
unless you're in your business.
And why do you think that is?
Well, you're kind of remote,
Okay,
and
there's
and
truth.
it's
You're
not
in-
taught in the history books.
Right. This is the important part. You know about remote places around the world because they're in the history books.
Right.
Why can this site not be in a history book?
You got to tell us because we wonder the same thing.
Because there's no written record. We know about the pyramids because there is a written record of these things being built. The people who built them or wrote these things down. You learn about this sort of stuff through the realm of archaeology instead of history. Without a written record to go with it, there is no narrative that can be made of the native peoples who lived here, what they called themselves, or why they built things specifically. So instead, archaeologists have the very tough job of doing things not very much from the top down, but from the bottom up.
They have to build that story from what they find here.
Yeah, what they find here, and not just the artifacts or the things people left behind. Most of the important record is the dirt itself.
The dirt?
Huh?
Yeah, you dig a hole in the ground. Where is the oldest stuff going to be in that hole?
Very bottom.
Where's the youngest stuff going to be?
The very top.
So the layers tell your story of when stuff was left behind. You can see evidence for how quickly or how slowly is something built. If there is a natural disaster or a flood, you would see evidence in the record.
Okay, so we could write a book about what we do not know about Poverty Point, but that's not the point, because, well, the real point here at Poverty Point is how long it's been here.
And that information is nothing short of astounding, because we know that people were inhabiting this place almost 2,000 years BC.
People had been digging and studying the site here for at least 100 years.
The indigenous.
Yeah, the native peoples, indigenous peoples, American Indians, and they've been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Take us back. How far back do we know right now
Okay.
that this place, has been here?
The earliest dates from radiocarbon dating at Poverty Point that are generally accepted go to about 1700 BCE, and then the dates run up to about 1100 BCE or so. So the peoples were living on the landscape that surrounds us here for roughly 600 years.
What we do know about Poverty Point is that the people who lived or visited here were involved in a mind-blowing piece of engineering where they built these huge mounds of dirt. One as high as almost 100 feet tall, covering more than 8 acres.
That's almost 400,000 tons of dirt they moved here. And we have no idea why they did it.
Who were these people?
They're native folks that lived here 3,500 years ago. And the peoples who lived here were part of a wider culture of different communities throughout the lower Mississippi Valley, down to the Gulf Coast, and other parts of the Southeast, maybe the Tennessee River Valley, parts of the lower Midwest and the Mid-South, who believed in a number of different things and had things in common with each other. We call them the Poverty Point culture, for lack of a better word. And back in the day, archaeologists were sure that the people living here were creating the culture, but the culture may have existed even before the site was being created. This certainly was the apex of the culture. This became the most important site of the culture.
Do we know about when this all started going away as far as this being the gathering place for these people?
We see a lack of evidence of occupation around 1100 BC or so.
And then how long before Europeans came to this area as far as we know?
3,000 years later.
Now, unless you're an archaeologist, anthropologist, or historian, Poverty Point is probably not the most exciting place in the world. It's not Disneyland. There are no games for the kids.
But if you care about our shared history, if you ever wonder what this world was like long before any of us, or for most of us, even our ancestors, set foot on the land that would become our home, if you want to know the history before it was written down, this could be the place for you, just like it is for Mark Brink Jr.
Does this not drive your wondering mind crazy, not knowing the answer to all of that?
It doesn't drive me crazy
It's
at all.
driving me crazy.
To not know.
I think that was my initial response, but we have to be okay not knowing all the answers. What I'm here to do is connect you to this ancient site and give you a sense of why this matters, what makes it so important. But through the process of archaeology, especially with a site this old, without a written record of what happened, I'm just not going to know the answers. Archaeologists have the task of creating a connect-the-dots puzzle. Have you ever done a connect-the-dots puzzle?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're missing 90% of the dots. What does the picture look like?
Oh, not much.
Just an outline.
And then you have to do work to fill in the dots you're missing. And so in today's world, we're using a tremendous amount of new technology and new techniques in order to fill in the rest of what's missing. Regardless of what I do not know, what I do know is that this is one of the most important archaeological sites in the world.
Now, there's so much more to know about Poverty Point and why it's here and what its significance was and why it's important even today.
Let's start that conversation with learning exactly who these people were and what they did here.
Well, first of all, they lived fairly comfortably. Based on the evidence, it looks like at least several hundred people were living here year-round. And they began to create mounds and earthworks after several decades of there being people here.
Mounds.
Yeah.
Explain. I mean, I'm thinking
Yeah.
mound, and
Yes,
that's what it
that's what it
means.
is. It's a
And
pile of
for
dirt.
what?
What
Why does somebody
purpose?
build a mound?
I don't know. We're still figuring it out.
You don't know. You just
Yeah.
know that they did this.
We know that they did this. In fact, the big mounds themselves contain remarkably little evidence of what happened after they were constructed.
are there any guesses or conjecture? Or?
Not anything very specific. So I can tell you a lot about what a mound is not,
Okay.
especially not at Poverty Point. So we don't find evidence of people living on the big mounds. Okay. So there's not trash deposits or midden, which is organic stuff that gets left behind over time, like
Midden.
yeah,
Okay.
like plant remains, like
Yeah.
rotten plant remains. You'd find animal bones. You'd find trash or like flakes of stone, little artifacts in the midden. You don't find post holes on the tops of the big mounds after they're built, meaning there's no structures on top. So there's not a temple or a house for an important person. You don't find burials inside these mounds. So we know a lot about what they are not. What we're left with is a flat, open mound, or sometimes a conical mound that was used for some kind of purpose by the ancient people.
Can you describe the size of these mounds?
Okay. So let's go through the site, one piece at a time.
Okay.
Right now, the visitor center which we sit is a small part of the plaza. Okay. It covers about 43 acres. Okay. It's semi-oval in construction, and it's built. The central plaza covers 43 acres, and the ancient people brought in roughly 175,000 cubic yards of earth to fill in this plaza, to creating a flatter, higher level surface. There's 6 ridges built outside of the plaza, okay, and they're nested, starting with Ridge 1, which was likely built as early as 1530 BC. That's the oldest date we have from around there, and likely built fairly slowly, with another ridge built outside of it sometime after that point, and then 4 other ridges that were built later on in the period, and they're all semi-oval in construction. Now, there's currently archaeology ongoing to sample different parts of the ridges to understand when each part is built and how quickly and or slowly they're also being constructed. But I would imagine we're going to see differences from one ridge to the next. Outside of those 6 ridges are the 3 of the largest mounds. There is a platform mound that's called Mound E, and it covers almost 2 acres of space. It's 13 feet high, and it's big and flat on the top.
That's a lot of dirt.
Yeah, it is a lot of dirt. But Mound A is a lot more dirt. So that mound is built around 3,500 years ago, sometime just after 1500 BC. Mound A is built roughly 300 yards to the north of it, and it's a lot more dirt. Okay, it covers an area of just over 8 acres or so, and it's roughly T-shaped, and it contains 390,000 tons of dirt.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the apex, the tallest part, is around 72 feet high. But when the mound was first built, sometime just after 1350 BC, it was likely between 90 and 100 feet tall. And the site has had 3,000 plus years of natural erosion. So we're going to have some loss of definition and height in all these mounds. And then the northernmost of the big 3 is roughly 600 yards north of Mound A, and it's called Mound B. And it's a circular-based mound with a conical shape, around 21 feet high today.
So probably the entire history of this place, all of the dots will not be covered in our lifetime.
Maybe ever.
Maybe ever?
Yeah, maybe ever.
Look,
and that's
Mark,
okay.
have you tried just plugging all this information into Google and asking AI?
Like AI?
Surely it'll just tell you what the answer is, right?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. AI can't do that. It can only take what is. It cannot create anything new.
Okay, I've
so
got to
AI
ask.
actually does a terrible job of explaining what the site is.
I can't wait
Yeah.
to do that and see what it comes back with. I really can't.
Yeah, AI also doesn't do a good job of separating fact from fiction. It takes the whole body of what's been said about a place or a site and unfortunately
Mixes it together.
Yeah. The ancient people who lived here roughly 3,500 years ago built the largest mounds and earthworks in North America. Okay. They were not farmers. These were hunters and fishers and gatherers. As far as we can tell, there are no larger monuments or earthworks ever built by hunters and gatherers in the world, not on the size or the scale. So a site like this one tells us about the ancestors of the tribes and nations who conducted the greatest engineering possible as a hunter and a gatherer. Okay, and in fact, it's not just about indigenous peoples, because for most of our prehistory or history, we were hunters and gatherers.
And how tall did you say the tallest mound is? Mound A?
Mound A is 72 feet high at its apex.
How in the world
Yeah.
would you get? I mean,
You take a bag and basket and you walk and you dump it out.
basket at a time.
Yeah, right. The central plaza was used as a place to gather, to dance, to sing, to conduct, ceremony and ritual, hang out with your friends, exchange with other peoples who were coming from across the rest of North America back in the day. But it's a clean space because it's multifunctional. Just like a field today, you could play football on it. You could also have a crafts fair. You could have a concert on it. Now they are building timber circles throughout parts of the plaza. So these are wooden structures, wooden timbers, dug into the ground and arranged in rings. And these are being built, removed, and replaced over a period of over 500 years on the site. So we can date these features using radiocarbon dating. Yeah.
Well, again, we don't know what those were for.
Again, we don't know what they're for. I can tell you what the timber circles are not. And we don't think that they're used for astronomy. And the reason for that is because, first of all, they're lacking a center post. At other sites, if you find a ring like that in a center post, they could be used as a calendar, with the shadows being casted for different times of the year, what have you. And unlike Stonehenge, there's not archways and other features where you would stand and view, say, solstices or equinoxes.
Yeah.
So I know that they're not used for that. Now, where we do find artifacts are the 6 ridges that surround the plaza itself. So we still estimate that there are likely tens of millions of artifacts throughout the ridges.
Tens of millions.
Still left.
Right, because when people live, they leave stuff behind.
Yeah.
Where do y'all keep your artifacts?
In our house.
In your house,
Yeah.
shed outside your house, sometimes in your yard.
Yeah.
And people haven't changed. You keep your stuff, your valuables, in the house or really close by.
So you're finding jewelry.
Yeah, so beads.
Beads.
They're making beads here, either out of red stone called jasper or copper. We do find copper beads being brought here, or the copper being brought in raw form and then shaped. And the stuff we're seeing actually being manufactured on site. So we can find stages of manufacture.
Here at Poverty Point. Okay.
Hunter-gatherer manufacturer.
Right. They're making stuff.
Yeah.
They're making things.
I like
Pottery?
creator.
Is there pottery that you?
There is some pottery here. Now, much of the pottery that has been rediscovered is imported. So some of the pottery is definitely coming in finished form. And some of this pottery comes from closer to the Atlantic coast, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Some comes from as far away as Florida, like in the Atlantic coast of Florida.
Any conjecture on why here?
We're sitting on an elevated ridge, a natural ridge called the Mason Ridge,
Okay.
that is a high point throughout the floodplain that surrounds us. In fact, if you look on the eastern side of the site here, you'll see a big bluff that goes into the water below. That is the edge of this ridge. So they live on the very eastern edge of this high point, okay, that does not flood and hasn't flooded in roughly 14,000 years, but they have easy access to the waterways, so the water is right there, and the floodplains beyond. And this is what ecologists call an ecotown. So it is a place that straddles different environments, and you have access to more and different and more varied resources. So that's important for a hunter, fisher, and gatherer too.
Do we think that this was a gathering point for more than one tribe of people?
I
Do
think
we
that
know?
would be pretty safe to say, if you want to use the word tribe. But the chiefdoms that existed thousands of years later did not exist during this ancient time. but certainly groups of people, different communities would have been gathering here, along with the year-round inhabitants of this ancient site. But their way of organization was entirely different to the chiefdoms and probably the tribes and nations that came afterward and into today's world. But here you have the occupational component, meaning likely hundreds of people living here throughout the year. You have lots of more people coming for parties and maybe even mound construction. So people coming here to share things with the inhabitants, and the inhabitants sharing things with them. We're not finding direct evidence of stuff made at Poverty Point where all the rocks and other materials are coming from. So either the people living here were going out and acquiring it, or quarrying different rocks and materials and bringing it back, or folks are coming from those areas and sort of, bringing stuff as gifts to share. And they might want to be here for religious reasons, for social reasons. It's fun to have a party, for instance, and maybe they're just party favors. So it's the most exciting place in North America. Why would you want to be in your village all the time? All the people, all the excitement was here.
It was all here.
Yeah, it was the place to be and the place to be seen if you were anyone in North America 3,500 years ago.
Are we finding remnants of people?
No, in fact, we haven't found any human remains from the ancient period.
Then how do we know they were here?
They built stuff. They left things behind. But not everyone buries their dead. And in fact, it would be kind of weird if we found burials here, because it wasn't part of indigenous practice, at least in this area or this time. None of these other cultural sites contain burials or even cremations. So it looks like the folks are taking care of their dead, but they're doing it in a way that doesn't leave remains. Maybe a water burial, that's one thing that's suggested, or some form of sky burial. So with a water burial, laying your ancestors out in the water, letting people float down or do what they do naturally. And animals can help take care of your ancestors in that way too. With a sky burial, it's the opposite. You lay people out on the surface, or who knows, on a mound or a platform, and let the birds take care of your ancestors. And if you're not burying the bones in either of these options, you might not be left with anything today.
That story opens up the door for all the people who think that aliens were here and did this, right? You probably hear that sometimes, right?
I try not to. It doesn't give folks enough credit if you believe in the aliens doing this. Where are the laser beams? Where's the advanced technology that you would expect to find from extraterrestrials? Never been found. Not here, not at the pyramids, not at Machu Picchu, not at the Great Wall of China, not anywhere. So that seems just silly to me.
Archaeologists are constantly digging here.
Okay, yeah.
They find something new. Okay. What does that do for you? Do you get excited about that the story now has a new take?
Yeah, I do. I do like it. But we do have to temper our excitement.
Because?
Because the story can take a long time to be told correctly. And if I start to tell the story wrong, that enters the public imagination. And that takes a long time to correct. So for example, do y'all think that Vikings were buried in burning ships?
Well, I've heard that.
You've heard it, right.
But
it's not true.
Yeah.
It's never been found to be true. There's a lot of these ideas about the past that were mistakenly put out there, and they stay in our collective memories.
Well, it looks good in the movies.
But archaeology is tedious.
Yes.
It is not fast work, nor can it be. Because for every hour you're out there at an excavation unit, you're probably spending at least 10 hours in the lab trying to make sense of what you're seeing. And it might surprise folks to learn that we don't have a single arrowhead on display in the museum because peoples did not use bows and arrows. Archaeologists in North America prefer to call these projectile points as a catch-all term. And during this period, they're used as knife blades, they're used as spear points, and they're mostly used as dart points. So darts that are launched with a tool that we call an atlatl today. But bows and arrows were only fully popular maybe 1,500 years after Poverty Point existed as a site. So being fully adopted by the native cultures between 5 and 700 AD or CE. You'll come to check out the museum that contains thousands of artifacts from the site. And it's really just a small fraction of what we have in curation. So it shows you samples of different stone tool technologies, whether they be the projectile points or the stone axes, which are called celts, or different soapstone bowls that people used, along with lots of the jewelry, whether they be beads or pendants. You'll see some iconography, so ancient art. You'll see lots of poverty point objects as well. And a poverty point object is a shaped earthen ceramic ball that ancient people heated to cook food. Throughout most of the rest of North America at the time, people used hot rock cooking. And at a site like this, without native rocks, they created their own artificial ones in order to cook in the same way. Because all the rocks that they did bring in, they didn't want to heat over the fire because that would destroy your working material. So instead, they would create useful stone tools instead. So you can take a guided tour with us. As long as the weather permits, they run Wednesday through Sunday at 10 o'clock, 11:30, 1 p.m., and 3 p.m. And you'll see the entire site starting from the plaza, the ridges, all the big mounds, back again to the visitor center, checking everything out. Myself or a ranger will talk you through the interpretation of each of the different mounds and earthworks along the way. Or you can do so in your own vehicle if you're short on time. So it's the same loop you would take on the tram with myself or a ranger. Or you can take a hike. So the hike is a 2.6 mile loop. If you have an hour and a half or 2 hours to spend, I definitely recommend that way.
You'll see more.
You'll see more, you'll get a lot more up close and personal. And in either of the self-guided options, you are full of the interpretation because I have comprehensive booklets that match the numbered markers on either trail.
Why should people care about this as far as you're concerned?
Why wouldn't anyone care? This is exciting. This is part of the shared past and understanding. And if you care about where you come from or where people come from and what we're capable of, Poverty Point is a must-see.
In a way, at some point, we may determine that these people are our ancestors. We just don't know, right?
Yeah, well, they're indigenous folks. So if you have native ancestry, certainly you share ancestry with the folks who lived here, okay? And that's likely regardless of your tribe or nation, if you are indigenous, because the folks lived 3,500 years ago. And genetics have a tree, right? Wide roots. So the peoples who lived here are likely the ancestors of dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of tribes and nations that exist in the United States today.
What do you want people to take away when they come here?
Yeah, when they come and visit and see all this, what do you want them to take back with them?
That people have always been capable of greatness. The story is that the native peoples, when they arrived here, they reshaped the earth and the image they liked. They started by creating the mounds, by creating the ridges, by creating the plaza, until they created something completely artificial. In fact, the native peoples who lived here created an entirely man-made landscape. And it is true that if you, as an outsider, would enter this site for the first time, you would leave the natural world behind, and you entered the only landscape that was built by people. And that was true for over 2,000 years, until a larger site was created, the Cahokia site.
Is this the dream job for you?
It's certainly a dream job. I like a lot of things, but no, this one's pretty awesome. It is rare to work with a site that is so important, because I mean, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of mountains throughout North America. And in my opinion, I don't think any is as important as Poverty Point, except for maybe the Cahokia site. Moundville's another important one if you want to go out to Alabama. And there's a few others that really are in that really important zone, but none are built by hunters and gatherers like this one. The people can't talk about their site anymore. I am just an in-between. I'm just trying to bring this story to you, regardless of how I feel about it. And what I'm giving you today is, hopefully not really my opinion, but the consensus of what we've learned through the world of archaeology so far. And what we are learning will probably change things in the future. So the story I'm telling you is a story of right now. It is not the story of 10 years from now, as we're doing a lot more work to better understand this ancient site through excavation, through geophysical survey, through sampling the dirt itself, and analyzing artifacts and other sorts of materials to better get a sense of what the ancient life was like here. They're native folks that lived here 3,500 years ago. And the peoples who lived here were part of a wider culture of different communities throughout the lower Mississippi Valley, down to the Gulf Coast, and other parts of the Southeast, maybe the Tennessee River Valley, parts of the lower Midwest and the Mid-South, who believed in a number of different things and had things in common with each other. We call them the poverty point culture, for lack of a better word. And back in the day, archaeologists were sure that the people living here were creating the culture, but the culture may have existed even before the site was being created. This certainly was the apex of the culture. This became the most important site of the culture that these folks were creating. We do have a story. Mm-hmm. We have the story of the archaeology and what we've rediscovered so far. So the nomination paperwork, or the document, is about this thick. Yeah, and it showcases the site, and it also compares it to other sites, not just locally, but around the world, and comparing information and significance, and including rubrics of basically like checkboxes. What do these sites have, and what does Poverty Point have? Poverty Point, in a lot of cases, has a lot more interesting stuff going on than a lot of these other ancient sites.
I personally find it, and I've been there a few times, more interesting than Stonehenge.
I would agree.
Because I go out there and I see it, and it's there, but that's it. I mean, it's
you could fit like 30 Stonehenges just inside the plaza of Poverty Point.
Yeah.
You know, this is a lot larger in scale and in significance.
We have been talking about this project for months.
And now, finally, we get to share a taste of what the USA250 Tour is all about.
And yeah, we are so excited. Bob, can you believe America celebrates its 250th birthday this year? And we decided the only way to truly honor that milestone was to find one story, one essential positive narrative in all 50 states that defines what America is today.
It's been a journey of discovery, Kelly. We're going to places you know and places you've never heard of, all connected by a common thread of perseverance, community, and I guess the American spirit.
Over the next few minutes, we're going to give you a sneak peek into the places we're stopping, from small-town West Virginia to the vast wonders of the Wild West. Think of this as your 2026 travel planner.
We start with the simple, enduring joy of nostalgia. It reminds us that our history isn't just in textbooks, it's in the general stores and on the back roads of America.
That's right. For West Virginia, we chose a place that captures the sweet innocence of small-town life. Burdine's Five and Dime in Harrisville, the oldest dime store in the country.
Stepping inside is like walking back a century. It's an essential snapshot of retail history and small-town continuity. What did you like about this place when you were a little girl coming in here?
It smelled good when you come in.
Smelled good.
There's a smell when you come in that's just older and rich, like your grandma's cellar or a building that you went into when it was hot in the summer, and those smells bring back good things. And then, of course, the candy.
And speaking of history and often overlooked parts of our past, For Connecticut, we're diving into a very niche but profoundly relatable piece of American architecture and human history.
That's where we met a fascinating outhouse expert. Okay, now this is less about sanitation and more about how ingenuity shaped the American landscape before indoor plumbing was commonplace.
Outhouses have been my life for a good 26 years or so. I don't claim to be an expert. I don't claim to know everything about it, but I also understand how they thought back then. It has a history, it has a craft behind it, and just a whole social structure about the outhouse.
From old architecture to an institution that embodies American industry and sport, the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory in Kentucky.
You can't tell the story of America without telling the story of baseball. It is our national pastime. And for generations, the Louisville Slugger has been the constant, the solid piece of wood connecting the player to the game.
Baseball is America's pastime. There's no other sport that has such great and rich history, and it just connects generations, whether it's watching it with a parent or a grandparent. My son, now learning the history of the sport, it's really neat for me to teach him about my heroes like Don Mattingly and Dave Winfield. It's really neat to be able to have those generations connected, just as my father taught me.
That same spirit of production, but in a totally different way, takes us to Idaho. Everyone knows potatoes, but they don't know the dedication behind this crop.
We'll be stopping at the Idaho Potato Museum, yes, there is one, to tell the story of the dedication and science that keeps us fed. It sounds simple, but it is a massive logistical agricultural achievement.
And your food source is about culture. It's about how we made our living. When we originally were all agrarian societies, but even as that expanded and those other industries grew up around that food source, whether it was a supermarket or processing plant, a job for a mechanic, all of these things are related.
Now let's talk about the incredible scope of this country. We shift gears completely, moving from the human-made to the truly timeless. Our stop in Wyoming.
Yellowstone National Park is foundational. It's not just a park. It is the place where the concept of national parks for the whole world began. The idea that the most magnificent parts of our land should be protected for all citizens forever.
Yellowstone National Park was explored. People who came, like Thomas Moran, who painted a picture of the falls, the upper and lower falls of Yellowstone National Park, took that back to Congress and said, this place is so special and magical, we should establish this as the world's first national park. So in 1872, Yellowstone became the world's first national park.
And the idea of preserving things for the future brings us to a place whose past is guarded by secrecy and scientific advancement. Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Oak Ridge, the secret city, is where the atomic age was born. It is a story of national urgency, brilliance, and secrecy that changed the course of World War II and, of course, changed the course of the modern world. We are exploring its pivotal importance in American history and science.
It was a secret city. It was formed as a part of the Manhattan Project in 1942, and from 42 until 49, there were gates on all the roads coming into the city, and if you didn't have a badge or a reason for being here, you couldn't get in.
Finally, we come to a location that is perhaps the most poignant reminder of the sacrifices that made America what it is today, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii.
Pearl Harbor represents a collective moment of national challenge, resolve, and unity. To stand there is to feel the weight of history and the unbreakable strength of the American people. This will be an emotional stop, but an absolutely necessary one for the USA250 Tour.
Pearl Harbor National Memorial is part of the National Park Service, dedicated to telling the stories that led up to, included the attacks on December 7th, 1941, and the events that would happen afterwards. And part of that is continuing to connect with those stories and engage with them, highlighting that as we reflect, we can find inspiration for peace and reconciliation.
Bob, that is just a fraction of what we planned for 2026. From coast to coast, from agricultural strength to cultural icons, we're highlighting the threads that hold this great nation together.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to all 50 states and having that one special story of significance from each one. It's a fantastic project, and we couldn't be more excited to share these stories with our listeners and eventually with American history teachers across the country.
And we'll wrap up this show with the document that started it all, the Declaration of Independence. And they do this every year on the 4th of July at Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia.
In Congress, July 4, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and their happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices, the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. For quartering large bodies of troops amongst us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of a trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province and establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing the most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous of ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. and that as free and independent states, they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.